with this session since it's really our plan to conduct this series of webinars and trainings since it's very timely that we have this upcoming deadline. So we just really hope that we will be able to share what we have um, experienced from the past few years that we had this EPR audits, EPR Act. Okay, so thank you for joining today's session. And I'm really honored to walk you through this law, why it matters, and how we can respond to it strategically and responsibly. Okay, so before we begin, here is what we will be covering in the first half of this session. So we will start by looking at the plastic pollution landscape here in the Philippines. Then I'll walk you through the key elements of the EPR Act of 2022, what is and why it matters. After that, we will explore implementation strategies that you can adopt in your organization. Then we will go into detail on compliance requirements, what is expected, who is covered, and also the timelines. Then finally, we'll wrap up with a brief conclusion. Okay, so just a brief history of the plastic in the Philippines. Okay, so plastics first arrived in Manila in the 1950s as a symbol of modern convenience, since plastics are lightweight, durable, and cheap. So sachets and disposable cutlery quickly replaced refillable glass and paper packaging. So at that time, we had almost no formal waste management infrastructure. So whatever we used simply entered open dumps and waterways. By the late 80s, our economy was opening up. Consumer goods were booming, and plastic became the default packaging for everything. So from shampoo to soy sauce. So production capacity soared, so did imports of finished plastic goods. Unfortunately, regulation lagged behind. So in less than 2 decades, per capita plastic consumption more than doubled, and mismanaged waste piled up along rivers and coastlines. Fast forward to mid 2000, researchers began tracking leakage into the ocean. So international studies called out the Philippines as the world's third largest source of marine plastic. Mainstream media ran headlines like the one you see in the middle of the slide. Civil society groups pushed for bans on single-use bags. Cities introduced no plastic day ordinances, and corporations started pilot take-back schemes. Awareness was growing, but results were still fragmented. So today, as we stand at the right most of the end of the curve, the arrow diagram shows the shift policymakers now require from the old take, make, dispose model to a make, use, return circular system. So this is where the EPR Act of 2002 comes in. So it legally obliges large enterprises to collect and divert a rising percentage of the very plastics they introduce into the market. Okay, so let's now talk about the waste reduction. So as early as the year 2000, the Philippines was already thinking about waste at a national level. So that's when the Republic Act number 9003 or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act was passed. So its main goals were straightforward back then. That is to reduce waste generation, to promote recycling, and to ensure proper disposal. So this law was built around the idea of protecting both the public health and the environment by managing waste more systematically, from segregation at source to final disposal. But while RA 9003 was a major step, it focused largely on the responsibilities of households, local governments, and waste managers. What it didn't do was assign direct accountability to producers and manufacturers, the ones introducing plastic and packaging into the market in the first place. So that gap was finally addressed in 2022 through RA number 11898. So that is the Extended Producer Responsibility Act. So this amendment places on a legal obligation um, on companies to be more responsible, not just for producing a product, but also for what happens after it is consumed, especially when it comes to plastic packaging. So, in other words, the EPR law makes producers part of the solution by mandating recovery, recycling, or proper disposal of the plastic they put into the world. So, this EPR is actually a very good move for everyone. Okay, so what is really EPR Act of 2002 or RA number 11898? So the EPR Act places the burden of plastic waste accountability on what it calls obliged enterprise or OE. We have attended a bunch of webinars, forums, and info sessions, and yet this question keeps on coming up. Who really counts as an obliged enterprise or OE? So OEs, these are large companies, whether manufacturers or importers, that use plastic packaging in any form. So if your business deals in plastics or any kind, like sachet, plastic bottles, or any kind of plastic container that are traceable to your brand and your total assets exceed 100 million pesos, you're covered by the law. Micro, small, and medium enterprises aren't mandated to comply, but they are encouraged to adopt EPR principles voluntarily. So the goal is clear. Make those profits from plastic take part in solving the plastic pollution problem, particularly in recovery and recycling post-consumer waste. Okay. So the law adopts a realistic, progressive phase-in approach to give businesses time to adjust. So as you can see in the screen, uh, every year, OEs must recover a higher percentage of plastic use from the previous year. So this doesn't mean companies have to physically retrieve their own packaging. Recovery can be done directly or through partnerships with registered waste recovery organizations or through plastic offsetting initiatives. So ultimately, by 2028, all obliged enterprises are expected to hit 80% recovery, moving toward a truly circular plastic economy. So to make extended producer responsibility work on the ground, the law identifies two key actors beyond the obliged enterprise itself. That is, one is the PRO or the Producer Responsibility Organization and the waste collector or diverter. So what is a PRO or the Producer Responsible Organization? So think of the PRO as the OE's compliance engine. So under um, Section 44-H, an enterprise can set up or join a PRO to pool resources, standardize processes, and negotiate better recovery services. So the PRO files the official EPR program with PNR, tracks performance, and submits the annual compliance report, taking a big administrative load off individual companies. Waste diverter or waste collector, on the other hand, are the boots on the ground. So these are barangay materials recovery facilities, junk shops, formal recyclers, and even organized household networks. So they collect or divert the plastic packaging, they record volumes, and feed those numbers back to the PRO or OE. So without reliable waste diverters or collectors, the recovery target can't be verified. So that's how important waste collectors and diverters are. So why this structure matters? By teaming up with a PRO and a network of WDs, an obliged enterprise can meet its recovery targets far more efficiently. So turning what could be a costly solo effort into a collaborative, data-driven system that benefits communities and environments alike. Okay. So as to the implementation strategies, when implementing EPR, enterprises are expected to act both upstream and downstream. So maybe we have heard about um, upstream and downstream. So that means working on reduction at the design and production level, that is upstream, and then recovery once products have entered the market, that is downstream. So for reduction, this could include switching to biodegradable or recyclable packaging, reducing material usage, and completely removing packaging types that have no end life solution, like multi-layered plastics or also the degradable plastic bags. So we have quite there are quite larger companies who really do this move already. On the recovery side, it's about building strong systems to prevent plastic from leaking into nature. This includes setting up partnerships with junk shops and waste collectors and working through PROs to ensure data-backed, traceable recovery. Many also support the return to store programs or invest in community recycling efforts. So that is the upstream and downstream. So to effectively implement the EPR Act, obliged enterprise must engage in both upstream and downstream strategies. Upstream activities focus on the design and production stage. Here, producers are encouraged to adopt reusable products or redesign of the product to improve its reusability, recyclability, or retrievability. Also, divert collected plastic waste into productive use, like recycled packaging, and set clear reduction targets over time. Another key step is the use of recycled content in packaging, helping close the loop. Downstream activities are all about what happens after a product is consumed. So this includes putting proper label on packaging to guide waste segregation, rolling out refill stations, and launching waste recovery programs. Education plays a major role here. Informing consumers through campaigns is also essential. Clean up activities and partnerships with local government units and informal waste collectors ensure plastics are not recovered but also tracked and verified. So together, these strategies form the core compliance pillars of the EPR Act. Okay, so how about the incentives and penalties? Okay, so first is for the incentive. Any expenses incurred in implementing EPR program, whether you do it yourself or through a PRO, are tax deductible as long as they are documented and directly tied to the program. So this is in line with the section 34A1 of our tax code. It's a significant benefit that offsets the cost of compliance. But if a company fails to comply by not registering their EPR program, not submitting reports, or not hitting recovery targets, the consequences are serious as well. Um, the DNR can impose administrative penalties, no, like for the first offense, 5 million to 10 million, second, 10 million to 15 million, third offense, 15 million to 20 million. Most critically, the business permits may be automatically suspended until all requirements of the PAR Act are fully complied with. So this sends a strong message that compliance is not optional. It's a responsibility and legal obligation. That's why we really encourage, even though there are still companies who haven't complied, we still encourage them to comply, even though it's late. Okay, so let us talk about the compliance schedule. Okay, so the reporting entity shall submit audited EPR compliance report on June 30 or the first working day thereafter of the following reporting year. So one of the key requirements under the EPR Act is the submission of an EPR compliance audit report or ECAR. So this report serves as the independent third-party certification that confirms the accuracy of the company's declared plastic footprint and its compliance with EPR obligations. So it must be uh, signed by a qualified auditor and include important registration details, like just as follows: the certificate number, the BOA accreditation number, CTR number, date and place of issue, and the tax identification number. So the ECAR should evaluate and reflect the EPR compliance report or ECR submitted by the OE. So it should show the company's declared plastic packaging footprint broken down by its material type, the amount of recovered or diverted plastic waste as implemented by waste diverters, the resulting footprint reduction, if any, from sustainable EPR strategies like redesign, recycling, or reuse programs. So in short, the ECAR is a critical document of proof that an enterprise is taking its responsibility seriously under the EPR law. Okay, so when it comes to validating compliance with the EPR Act, particularly the ECAR, so it is also important to understand the different types of audit engagements that can be performed. So these differ in terms of scope, auditor responsibility, and the level of assurance provided. So let's break them down into three main categories. So first is the agreed upon procedure, AUP. So this type of engagement is governed by Philippine Standards on Related Services, PSRS 4400 revised. So in an AUP engagement, the procedures are pre-agreed between the auditor and the engaging party, which could be the obliged enterprise or a regulatory agency. So in the DAO, no, it specifically stated the procedures to be followed. So in AUP, in this type of engagement, the auditor does not provide an opinion or assurance. Instead, they report only factual findings based on the procedures performed. So as to the procedures, no, so the auditors begin with document requisition. So we ask the reporting entity to submit the signed EPR compliance report and the EPR program they have implemented and all supporting documents. So we then verify the declared plastic footprint by sampling SKUs, particularly those with high volume plastic use. And we also vouch these against the invoices, the delivery receipts, and also the purchase orders. Then we perform actual SKU weigh-in to confirm the weight per unit. It's also followed by detailed recalculation of the total plastic usage. Okay, so for the diversion side, we sample diversion data, usually focusing on diverters with the highest claimed recovery volume. Then we vouch diversion certificates or related acknowledgements, and then we recalculate the total volume diverted. So this helps us assess how much of the declared footprint has been through the EPR program. Okay, so for the second and third type, we have limited and reasonable assurance. So these are guided by the PSAE 3000 for non-financial information. So, in a limited assurance engagement, the auditor performs procedures to obtain a moderate level of assurance, meaning we check enough to say nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe the report is materially misstated. So it is less extensive than a full audit, but it also goes beyond AUP by requiring the auditor to exercise professional judgment and skepticism and to provide negative assurance. So this might involve reviewing controls or systems used to gather footprint data. This can also involve interviewing responsible personnel, analytical reviews, testing supporting evidence, but in less depth or volume than in a full audit. So this option is useful for companies that want some level of external credibility, but don't need a high level of assurance. Then finally, we have the reasonable assurance, which is the highest level of assurance. So it's similar to the financial statement audit. So in this engagement, the auditor performs detailed procedures to obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence to support an audit opinion. So this output is positive assurance report, unlike the limited assurance one, which is negative assurance report. um, this states that the report is fairly presented in all material aspects. So this is guided by the full suite of audit standards like the um, Philippine Standards on Auditing, tailored to the nature of the engagement. So in this case, the APR compliance report. So the auditor will examine the internal controls around data collection. We conduct site inspections if necessary. We perform detailed sampling and extensive vouching, and also test the reasonableness of assumptions and methods used in the EPR. So this level of audit is often required for larger enterprises, especially those with significant environmental impact or public visibility, and when stakeholders demand a high level of reliability in the data. It takes more time and cost, but provides also the highest confidence to regulators and stakeholders. So to summarize, AUP provides no assurance. Limited assurance gives moderate assurance, and reasonable assurance offers the highest confidence. So still, the choice depends on your company's size, complexity, and also the expectation of the stakeholder. So we're down to the last slide. So just to sum it up, no, the EPR Act of 2022 is more than just a regulation. It's actually a call to action. So this law encourages sustainable practices in consumption by engaging the government, producers, and consumers to work together. It reminds us that compliance is just the beginning. So we must go beyond the minimum and implement circularity measures that really reduce our environmental impact. Because at the end of the day, we can create an infinite volume of resources, but the earth has limited capacity to absorb what we produce. So we really hope that we choose to produce responsibility, not just because the law says so, but because our future also depends on it.
So I believe everyone is ready now to know the second topic now. So basically, um, this topic will be a guide for everyone to know the key processes of application, amendment, and other audit essential under the EPR framework. Na. So let's start. Na. And our discussion will basically cover, and the goal of this is to of course, everyone to know how to comply, how to prepare for your company, if since I already discussed if you're an OE, yan. And of course, how to be audit ready in taking on the compliance side, no? So our discussion will basically cover the application process, no, implementation and compliance, amendments, ground penalties. So we also covered the penalties included. Though I already discussed a while ago the initial related penalty, we will also discuss later the all the related penalties under the EPR Act, no, and the audit overview. So what you need to know or what you need to prepare in if you want to be audited under the for this compliance, no. So before we go to the first agenda, no, let me first discuss who and know the regulator behind this, no. So the implementation of the EPR falls under the DNR, no. So they are the primary government agencies responsible for conservation, management, and development of the environmental and natural resources. Then also, they also are the overall supervisory body over the, of course, the BBM, EMB, and other um, agencies. No, they also responsible for issuing policy guidelines and administrative orders, no, related to the EPR, such as the recent DAOs, the DAO 2023-02 and 2024-04, no. Then of course next is the NEC, no. NEC, National Ecology Center, is basically it is created way back on the start or the implementation of Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, no, before the EPR Act is enacted, no. So they basically under the EPR, so they still provides technical assistance and support, and of course help in the data management, public education, capacity building on the environmental matter. And they also give a big help in assisting and developing the review wing of the EPR program, your EPR program that you'll be submitting to uh, the 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 DNR, no, and other diversion strategies, no. And of course the EMB. So EMB is serve as the implementing agency, no. They also oversees the registration, compliance monitoring, and submission of your EPR program. And also they also one of the uh, reviewer and approver of the program, no, and monitor of the compliance. And lastly, the PUB, so the Pollution Education Board, which handles the um, enforcement action and education of violations and issue fines and other sanction, no. So this NEC, EMP, and PUB is under the DANR, no. So they are all under DNR. So let's begin with the process, no? So application process. So the OE, if you're considered as OE, you need to prepare and submit the following documents, no? So basically, it's you have a two document to prepare, no? First is the general requirement, and second is the EPR program. So for the EPR program, you will which we will cover later in the succeeding slides. No, let's talk about that later. Then the general requirement first is the letter of intent. No, so the letter of intent should stipulate whether the application is an OE or a PRO or a collective. No, so if you can also stipulate there if you're with or without a PRO. No? So, yun yung dapat nakalagay sa letter of intent natin. So, the letter should also be signed by the duly designated officer responsible with the EPR, no, or if who will assign by the company to be the duly designated officer, then it's corresponding contact details, no. This letter also should support by an SPA or a resolution. Pwede din yung corporate secretary certificate on the designation officer responsible, no? Together with the sworn statement executed by the designated officer as well. Of course, you also need to prepare the DTI or sex certificate or registration, BIR certificate or 2303, and business permit. Yan. Then once it's already completed, you submit it to DNR, EMD, or NEC, and they will issue you a particular number or an acknowledgement receipt in relation to the submission, no? And they will process it and examine the completeness of your files, no? They have 3 days. They have 3 days to complete the examination. So if complete, the NEC shall email the duly designated officer for the order payment, no? So order payment to push on the review of the EPR program, no? So however, if your application is incomplete, they will revert to the OE or the PRO collective, and the latter should address the incomplete document, no? So yun, after that, the 3 days will still on the run on that. Then, but if it's already complete and you already submit or provide a manual or electronic proof of payment, so the NEC or EMBNDN or will have at least 20 days after to complete the evaluation process of your application. So this includes the checking the completeness of the EPR program, if it contains or if it's compliant and consistent with the related information you need to include. So yun, in any case that there is a deficiency, so they will still revert to you, and you should address the deficiencies, no? And revert back to the NEC for further evaluation. So once the your application and program is satisfactory, no, they will issue you a EPR registry number, no, and the registry number is will be in a triplicate form, no. This will be distributed to NEC and the commission or the EMB and the Bureau of Registry Office, no. And you will also be having a copy. So the OE will be having a copy for the EPR registry number. So take note for the OE, you should receive the original copy of the certificate, not the photocopy one, since the photocopy would be for the Bureau Registry Office, no? So yeah, so that's the one of the reminders. Um, but however, if you're under a PRO, it would be a different story, no? So if you're an OE and you opted to be under a PRO or collective, you will only need to prepare the general requirements, no? And the PRO or collective will be the one who will be responsible to the other processes. And of course, PRO and collective is responsible to ensure that we provide other documents such as the organization or membership roster for them to ensure for them to provide to NEC. No? They will also be responsible in addressing and ensuring the completeness of the documents and the consistency under the EPR program. So that's basically the process. For the EMD and NEC, it's the same. They will be having a 3-day process for the checking of completeness and 20-day process for the this is business day for 20-day process for the evaluation of your EPR program. Okay. So right now, if we will be discussing the components of EPR program, no? So what we need to know, or what you're going to include on your EPR program. So basically, EPR program can be both be conducted or provided by PRO or an OE, or even an OE if you're under PRO. You can include that on your voluntary disclosure when sending your ECR to your PRO, no? So, yun. So, what is the component of your EPR program, no? So, first is basically the packaging and type of brand. This should be a specific type of packaging material, whether it is a flexible or a rigid type, or you can also expand it to a more um, to a more different form, no? If it's composed of other materials, no, you can also include that in your EPR program. As long as they are used or distributed in the market, you have to disclose it, no. Second is the plastic packaging footprint, no. The verifiable weight, which is very important. You should disclose the verifiable weight expressed in kilogram. So take note that it should always be on the measure of a kilogram, no, which is also brought into the market within a specified period. So we need to take note that the plastic footprint should be within the calendar period, no, based on the year reference on stated a while ago by Ira. If your year reference is 2023 or 2022, if you start in 2022, so the whole plastic footprint for 2022, you should disclose on your APR program. Next is the diversion target, no? So footprint to be recovered and diverted on a yearly basis to prevent them from leaking into the environment, and related program or partners to achieve the recovery target, no? So you may include there the targets. So the target and the other programs that you may use. We can also include there the PROs involved or any waste diverter involved in your program in achieving the recovery target. So yeah. Next is the other programs, no? Other programs basically on the upstream side, since the diversion is more on the downstream, no? A while ago, I already discussed what are the upstream related activities. So you may include there the other programs for plastic waste abundance, reduction, and redesigning of your packaging to improve its reusability and recyclability, no? Of course, you may also include the labeling of packaging material to facilitate the recovery, reuse, recycling, and proper disposal of packaging material. So right now, no, as you see on the market, no, you can already see that majority of the producer of plastics or majority of the obliged enterprise providing plastic packaging, no, they improve already their packaging materials, no, they put labeling on their plastic packaging, no, to ensure that they can be reused or recycled or put in the proper bin, no. So yun. The program also should include the various components, no, of implementation and its parameter and strategies, no. And finally, the compliance status, where the OE, PRO, or collective may disclose all prior initiatives. So not only the prospective initiatives, but also the prior initiative can be included in your EPR program. That is especially if the program is within the EPR related activities, and even if it is accomplished prior the enactment of the law. So you can also include that on your EPR program. Since this EPR program is the initial requirement of the DNR enactment for the application process, no? So yun. In any case that there were changes, no, in your current status or strategies, it can be amended, no? So amendment would be there is a two types of amendment. This is a minor and major amendment. So for minor amendment, it could be change in business name, address, or other information, no? So those are the basic information. There could also be a change, minor changes related to OE membership, going to PRO, no? Or changes made from, sorry, changes made in the mode of compliance, no? Individual of large enterprise to join in a collective of PRO. So these three are all minor amendments. No? So this minor amendment has a maximum processing time of 7 days. No? So basically, the requirement need will only be the written requests or a triplicate copy covering your EPR registry and a three-columnar um, information in relation to your original provision, what to be amended or supplemented, and the reason for changing, no, or amending. In relation to the major amendment, so this basically require more than 7 days, which is 20-day processing period, no? So, change and mode of compliance, no? Member of a PRO intending to have a EPR registration as individual or change in EPR program or additional withdrawal of OE membership. So, these two are the major amendments which require a longer period, no, of evaluation. So yun. Those requirements or your written request should be submitted to NEC, no, for evaluation, and they are expected to revert to you in case for any comments or information that still next needs to for you to provide. But uh, nevertheless, you will still need to communicate thoroughly with with NEC for you to process the amendments, no? So yun. You can also check this amendment to under the 2023 section 16 dash point 4, no? And this right portion or the table, this is came from the recent draft EPR procedural manual, cascaded or happened during the one of the public consultation of NEC, no? EMB and NEC, uh, the beginning of the year. So yeah. So next would be the offenses and penalties, no? So basically, um, um, in terms of penalties, PAB is basically the one who will be imposing the set penalties, no? And what are the specific offenses that are grounds for penalty, no? So whether or not the compliance is a result of failure to register. So if you fail to register, you will be penalized, no? So regardless if it's intentional or unintentional. And next is falsification of documents. So a misdeclaration of generated or recovered footprint, employment of any scheme to maliciously evade responsibility of an enterprise under EPR Act of 2022. Fifth is to failure to meet the required diversion target or even the tampering of its compliance with the provision of sections 44F. So this basically are the penalties revolving to the PUB. And of course, the violation shall impose the following fines, no? First offense is fine not less than 5 to 10 million, whether it is on different types of penalties, no? Second offense is not less than 10 million, but exceeding 15 million. And the third is 15 but not exceeding 20 million, and then automatic suspension of business permit. So in the recent pub consultation, no, around early March, so they already have a presentation or suggestion metrics for every violations, no, here. If you ayan, if they have, if you misdeclare the recovery footprint, so they already have a metrics on that. And of course, the failure to register, they already have a metrics, and even the misdeclaration or under declaration of accomplishment. So they already provide some suggestion metrics on how much are will be the penalties for the misdeclaration of those accomplishment, as well as the recoveries. No. I think this is ayan. Lastly is the how EPR is conducted, no? So how are we going to be audit ready in case that we are going to have our third party auditor check our books, no? So it is important for the each of the OEs that they know what to prepare and what is expected for the third party audit to be will to be doing, no? So first is it is expected that the OEs, TRO, and collective should prepare the following documents, though the ECR, which is the um, EPR compliance report. Then next is the EPR program, or the document that you submitted to NEC and EMB for your EPR process. So that is the main or general requirement for starting the audit, no? And other supporting documentation, such as the accountable footprint, which covers the volume or the sales volume and the SKUs, no, SKU weight plastics, and the diversion schedule. So basically, the diversion schedule covers the type of plastic that you recover, who are the collecting officers or who are the collecting agencies for that, and the diversion diverters for the diversions, no? And other related processes and documentation that you'll be providing to us, such as the processes internal control processes that you'll be doing, especially if your audit is under a limited assurance. No, if it's under a limited assurance, there's still a other processes aside from the regular DOW 2023 2024-04 stated there, no? So there is additional process or audit and walkthrough that needs to be completed, no? So once you provided that to your auditor, the auditor expected to examine the documents, no, through accuracy testing, sampling, or weighing of it could be weighing or validation of weights based on the accountable footprint schedule that you provided, validation of sales volume, whether it is through invoicing or through your system itself, or SKU, ayan, SKU weighing, and the actual recalculation of the footprint. We all know that you already prepared your draft calculation when you provided the ECR, but as auditor, we need still be responsible to recalculate and provide you the audited data or actual data based on the audit conducted under footprint. So yan. For the diversion verification, on the other hand, it is expected to check the accuracy testing of what you've declared on your ECR the uh, versus the notarized diversion certificate you presented to your auditors, no? And of course, there will also be a recalculation on the diversion certificates, but normally, some of the diversion certificate provided by your waste diverter is only one, no, certificate, but some are you go or get your diversion certificate to other waste diverters. So that's why we are checking all the documentation to ensure that you accurately declare it to your ECR, no? And of course the recalculation of diversion accomplishments. So this is one of the key important tasks of your auditor to double check the diversion accomplishment, since this is also one of the it could be fines together doon sa fines that we already discussed a while ago. It can be in a form of misdeclaration, so it's part of it can be you can be penalized on that. So that's why it is important that your auditor should check that, and other walkthrough and process validation that should the your auditor should be doing. No, some of the limited assurance. Tasks or activities are more on this area, no, the walkthrough and process validation to for you also for you to help for your auditor to help you on how to improve your processes in terms of EPR compliance, no. And lastly, your auditor is expected to give you an audit report based on the agreed engagement, whether it is an agreed upon procedure, limited assurance, or a reasonable assurance. No? So, yeah. And I think I'm on my last slide. So, just to give you a key takeaway, no? This is just a reminder not to avoid compliance risk, no, such as non-registration, falsification, and other diversion shortfall lead to penalty, you know. So first is know your category and complied with all the documentary requirements, no. Keep your program up to date. So amendment must be formally submitted and justified, and do it accordingly. So be audit ready, no? Maintain a clear, verifiable record to support EPR and diversion activities and other EPR programs. And of course, stay engaged, proactively communicate with our regulators for compliance and up-to-date information. So, yeah. Once again, thank you so much for being here. No?